Hello, mixed nutcases. This is Nuchtchas, and we are here at a live episode of Nutty Bites. It's not exactly a nutty debate. This is going to be even more roundtable than our normal debates are, because I wanted to talk about crowdfunding. I wanted to talk about Patreon specifically because it's a different style of crowdfunding that's different from Indiegogo and Kickstarter and Pledge and all the other ones that we've grown accustomed to. And I wanted to talk about ways that we can reward our content creators. This is something very near and dear to my heart. And so I have three Patreon-ages, I don't know, whatever the people who run Patreon campaigns are called. Maybe they'll clue me in. With me today, I have Scott Roche.
Hello.
I have Dave Schlusher.
Hi, everybody.
And I have James T. Woods.
Hello, how's it going?
All right, so each of you have Patreons, and each of you are at different stages, which is kind of neat. Dave has just started his. James, you've had yours going for how long now?
I think I launched in July, but really started posting stuff on there in about August.
Okay. And Scott, how long have you had yours? You were the first Patreon I supported.
I think James and I probably came on about the same time because I know I had to post 4 months of stuff on my taxes from Patreon. So, so yeah, that would have been August or September.
Excellent. Oh, you know what I did? I didn't hit record.
I have a safety copy, so.
Excellent. But I'm a bad podcaster. I'm just going to do that quick intro very quickly again. Hello, Mixed Nutcases. You are tuned in for a special episode of Nutty Bites where we are going to be discussing Patreon, crowdfunding, and how to support content creators. With me today, I have Mr. Scott Roche.
Hello.
I have Dave Schlusher.
Howdy, everybody.
And I have James T. Woods.
Hey, how's it going?
And every one of these people are... They each have a Patreon campaign, and I still don't know what that word is for somebody who owns one. Dave is new, and both Scott and James have been really producing content for since August, but started last summer-ish, beginning of the summer. So, Patreon. What is Patreon? Who wants to fill everyone in on this interesting site?
I can jump in there. I actually got to have a few beers with the founder of Patreon, a guy named Jack Conti, who he is in a band called Pamplemousse, French for grapefruit.
I love Pamplemousse. They're so great.
And they were putting out these awesome videos that were getting millions of views on YouTube, and through the YouTube advertising and all of that, they were making $50, $100. And that wasn't even beginning to pay for the production, all of the set design, all of the stuff they were doing for their videos. And so Jack got together with some friends. They're based out of San Francisco, and they started looking at alternative ways to do things. You know, the crowdfunding model of Kickstarter, Indiegogo, those kinds of things is really feast or famine sort of situation. And so they wanted something that was a little bit more consistent. And so, I mean, really, the bottom line is it started for people who are making awesome videos on YouTube to find a way to keep making more videos on YouTube.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, it was really definitely something that I think Jack started to monetize, to help YouTube people monetize what they were doing, because there were no good tools for them to do that. And you know, ad funding, because most people use ad blockers or this or that. You know, there's very little ad funding. So,
and do you really want to make somebody watch a 2-minute ad to watch your 5-minute video or however long minute video?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when I joined as a
Jack started to monetize, to help YouTube people monetize what they were doing, because there were no good tools for them to do that. And you know, ad funding, because most people use ad blockers or this or that. You know, there's very little ad funding.
Why am I hearing Scott again? Do you really want to make somebody watch a 2-minute ad to watch? Why am I hearing myself now? Or a 1-minute video?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
weird.
I'm trying to think when I joined as a
Started to
Just
monetize,
let this go. This is what
what they were
happens when it's
doing.
live.
There were no good tools for
Oh,
them to
it's just looping now.
and ad funding because most
I'm
people
gonna
use
mute
ad
Scott for a
blockers.
minute just to see if that's it, because it seems like it's coming from him. Oh, there we go. He muted himself. Excellent. So that just became a recursive loop. So, Dave, what was it you were gonna say?
I was
That
saying I'm trying to think when I joined as a
It's still on you, Scott. Go. This is
monetize
what
what they were
happens when it's
doing.
live.
There were no good tools for them
Oh,
to
it's just looping now.
and ad funding because most
There we go.
Okay, good gravy, Scott. Um, so I'm trying to remember when I joined as a patron. I'm gonna think it was probably not long after the site went live, because I want to say it's been maybe at least a year. I started joining. I joined and I started supporting Scott Kurtz and several. Almost like at the beginning, it was almost all webcomics guys were the ones that I was supporting. I didn't support podcasters until very recently, because for the most part, like the people that I subscribe to, I don't think anyone in my list has had a Patreon account until very recently. So um, I was well acquainted with it as a patron, but very new to it as a whatever as the term we don't know yet,
Yes.
as the patriate.
Whatever.
I don't know.
Yes, we'll have to come up with a word for that.
Well, the beauty of it is, and I figured out what that recursive loop was. I had the window of the Hangout open in another browser
Oh,
tab.
and it was playing in the background.
Yeah. The beauty of the Patreon model is it lets everybody come up with their own title. Because when you set up your Patreon page, it asks you what you want to be called. So I picked genre mixmaster and short story ninja. So that's what I am.
And that's a very apt title, I think. Yeah, I think Patreon has been really great for, as you said, the YouTube creators, the web comics, and then it started to branch into authors and into podcasters. Now, authors, a lot of times, how do we support authors? Well, we go and we buy their books. But how do you support authors who aren't being published all the time, or you really can't support too much without being, paying into a magazine that is publishing them and so forth? And how do we get that money to that creator to inspire them? Because the idea of a patron, and I've always been a big fan of this word because, and specifically as an artist, back in the old days, artists had patrons. Somebody would pay for you to live and eat, and they would pay for your expenses, and you would create art for them. And it was a great idea, and it doesn't work anymore because it's the modern age and everybody is expected to have their own job and to pay for their own life. And if you want to create, that's something extra that you do. And if you're very lucky, you end up getting a book deal, or you get signed in. If you're a band, you get signed onto a label. But even then doesn't seem to really be the crowning achievement that it used to be. I mean, Stephen King, it may be one of the last writers that's able to go into a cabin and just write and never have to actually do a day job, whereas even authors who have quit their day jobs, they still have to promote, they still have to publish, they have to go to appearances, they have all the other things that come into it on top of writing. So for me, as I've rambled, I like this idea because it gets back to the idea of let's let these creatives do what they do best, and let's support them in this way.
Mhm, mhm.
As I've said to some people, I am a big fan of Scott Sigler. If he put up a Patreon, I would not be giving him money. Why? Because I buy every book that he puts out.
Mhm.
But authors that don't have that kind of an outlet, I want to push them so that they keep writing, so that they get to a point where they have published deals, or just that they can keep writing.
Mhm.
Well, it's definitely not a model that works for every possible thing.
No.
I mean, it works best. So, like when we talk about the things that we're supporting, They work best, I think, for a creator that produces something relatively small at a consistent rate.
Agreed.
What you could do, so there is an existing thing called like Storyteller's Bowl or something like that, where authors of longer work say, I think Lawrence Watt Evans was doing this, where you basically say, I want $50 a chapter, and you write a chapter and post it, and then people pledge to it, and when there's $50 pledged, you write the next chapter and post it, and you kind of go through a book that way, and unless, say, you are going to post your chapter, like serialize your work in progress to Patreon, like only to your patrons, there's really not a book author. There's really not a good way to make that model fit.
Right.
Other than it's just like what you were just saying is this is to keep me alive while I'm writing. So it almost kind of makes sense to do makes more sense to kickstart a book at the end. So we're going to find kind of this. You have kind of impedance mismatches on some of these models, and I think eventually we're going to sort out which tool you use for which problem. And
oh, Dave, that was such a geeky term, and I love it. The impedance mismatch. Oh, makes my heart happy. Yeah, I've been struggling with exactly that in the stuff that I've been doing on Patreon. So I started writing short stories. And each one was about the length of a chapter in a book. And for me, I was writing short stories they're all going to be backstory or sort of connected to larger works, connected to novels. But I realized that that wasn't as clear to my readers, and so there wasn't a strong pull for the readers to want to come back week after week. And so I just started, actually today I posted the 6th chapter of a novel, and it's a sequel to a novel that I put out about a year and a half ago, and I've been serializing it. And it's an action comedy, so it kind of lends itself to the serial format. But I'm playing with those models to sort of see where am I going to find the best match, where am I going to motivate the most people. But I've noticed Patreon isn't a destination on its own. It functions well for YouTubers, podcasters, webcomic people who have their own destination and that funnel people back to Patreon to support them. Whereas I don't have a strong destination. Right now, Patreon is my destination, and I'm struggling to get the organic growth that you might find on YouTube.
I think and this is from my discussions with folks at Patreon and also from reading the stuff that they put out there for their creators, they really want to be a destination. They want you to post stuff there. Whether it's your webcomic or your whatever, and they don't want to be a paywall per se. So they want you to put up stuff that your people that are patronizing you, people that are giving you money every month, your patrons. They want those people to be able to see it, but they also want the general public to be able to see it. And so what I've done a couple things in the time that I've been playing around with this model. I've put out short stories like James has. I've serialized a novel. I've serialized something that's, I guess, kind of a novel, but I'm taking more of an episodic viewpoint of it rather than a chapter viewpoint on each piece. And some of that stuff I put for patrons only. Some of the short stories I put for everybody to be able to see, because those I think give the short stories are a good short, one-off type thing that you can get a feel for my style as an author, and then if you want to go deeper into my stuff, you'll become a patron and you'll be able to see the longer form things that I put out. That's the way I've been treating it. So it's the one drawback to Patreon, and I've talked with them about this, is as an author, and James and Dave, you can probably speak to this, they don't have a lot of really any good tools for us to post longer form fiction. because reading, they don't have formatting tools for the text, and just reading a big blocks of text is just not appealing. So what I've done is basically use Google Docs, and I've used that as a way. I put a link in all the stuff that I put up there. So you still have to end up going off the page to read it, but at least I've got a place for you to come to get to that content that's not my blog or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. So it's a bit tougher for us since we're not producing a visual or auditory work. Although I am planning on recording my stuff in audio format, and I'm sure that Dave is too. I don't know about James. So there's that possibility. But yeah, they're still developing tools for people that are dealing with text instead of audio or webcomic or video.
Absolutely. Now, there was a merger this week that happened after I decided we were going to talk about this. Does anybody know enough about the company that Patreon merged with?
I had never heard of it until that announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it, but I had heard of, the Vlogbrothers, Hank and John, and so I sort of knew about them. And I watched the announcement, and so I sort of got the backstory of everything. And it was that thing that happens in the world where two people had the same idea and started it at the same time. And from what I heard, Subbable, which was the name of theirs, they had 24 creators on their thing, so they hadn't really expanded their creator base very broadly. It was mostly the flagship, the Hank and John doing their thing, and then a few others that were in there. And once they hit a thing with Amazon was changing the payment system on them, and they said, instead of doing that, why don't we, join forces with Patreon? And that's the short of it.
Yep. Now, one of the things that I remember reading is, switch from Amazon to PayPal, but every time I've done Patreon, I've not seen an option for PayPal. Is that just something that's in the States, or were they quoted wrong?
That doesn't even register to me. I've used Patreon a few times, I've used Patreon a lot.
Yeah.
I have become a patron of several people, and I don't remember the payment options off the top of my head.
I mean, you can do credit card. I think that may be it.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. So I'm sure that maybe what I was reading had it wrong.
I think
I was like, is this just a Canadian thing? Am I missing an option?
Well, as much as I do hate Canadians, you know my hate.
Oh yes, totally.
I think that was probably more to do with the payout to the artists, maybe.
Right.
They had the option to have to use PayPal as an option to pay the creators. And the other thing that's great about Patreon versus Subbable, so I'm kind of glad that they won the. It's not a battle, but I'm glad that they came out on top. Is their payout to artists is much higher. Subbable is like 70%.
Oh.
Patreon is what? Not over 90%, I think.
That goes to answer our first question in the Q&A, by the way. Lynette from the Bycast says, "Hi Nutty, crowdfunding is great, but they sure take a big bite of the pie. Who do you recommend as far as fees go?" And again, it depends, I think, also what kind of crowdfunding you're going for. Are you going for a project that will be done and completed at a certain time, or are you looking for something ongoing? And if 90%, that's a pretty good. That's pretty good, I would say, for content creation. I don't know how that compares to, say, just accepting payment through PayPal.
Really, it's you only lose a few points. I mean, it's basically what you lose in Patreon. PayPal gets a piece and Patreon gets a piece. But it's very reasonable. When you look at the other sort of project crowdfunding options like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, definitely we're getting more as creators from Patreon than we do from the other two. But part of that is because you've got additional players, so there's more people that get a piece of the pie for those.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's really good information to know. And I would say before anyone wants to start a crowdfunding project is to really look at the different options that there are and to compare those rates. One thing that I do know for all the people that have run Indiegogos, Kickstarters, Pledge Music, and all the other ones out there, the biggest problems and roadblocks that they come into is when they underestimate the cut that's being taken, the taxes they'll have to pay on it, which again, people are giving you money, you still have to pay taxes on that. That's income, and the cost of rewards. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I just want to update that Yeti Sarge says it may be a Canadian thing, referencing PayPal on Patreon, because looking at the FAQ, they say you can use PayPal on their page. So they may just be blocking it for my IP here in Canada then. That's fine. I have no problem using my credit card. I actually prefer it that way because, again, less fees. I don't know if that would change how much goes to the artist or not. That would be a good question for Patreon themselves.
Well, kind of touching on that, the credit card idea is one of the things that kind of surprised me is, so Patreon is still, it's what, less than 18 months old as a platform. Yeah. And I kind of had it seems mature enough. I mean, it's got enough mind share and people talk about it enough that I kind of assumed that when I started this new campaign that I would be getting mostly existing Patreon users. Kind of like if you remember what Kickstarter was like 5 years ago, you essentially have two hills that you're climbing at the same time. One is to, I want you to come back my project, and also I want you to give your credit card to this third-party site that you haven't done before. So, in that respect, Kickstarter has really won that war in that I would imagine now, when people fund a Kickstarter, 90, 95, 98% of those accounts pre-existed that because they've already boiled that ocean, and there's millions of people with Kickstarter accounts. I was surprised. The last time I looked, over half of my patrons supported only one project, and that was me. And I really kind of expected it would be, more of a. I expected I would be a net gainer from the platform rather than a net importer to the platform. And so that was actually surprising to me. But the upside of that is it suggests that there's still a lot of growth for more people to come in and be users.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I'm looking at my patrons right now, and I'm kind of all over the map. I've got a couple people that I'm their only artist they're supporting. I've got 2s and 3s, and then I've got people that are supporting over 10. So I'm bringing some new people in where I hope they will support other creators, but I'm also pulling in existing Patreon users. I think one of the hurdles that I've started to overcome, and that I think that in any situation like this needs to be overcome, is I'm being supported by other creators in addition to being supported by regular patrons. So in a lot of cases, you've got the early adopters where we're all creators and we're all supporting each other. So all this money is really
not going anywhere.
Going into my pot and then going out and going into your pot.
And now everybody's paying taxes on it.
Right. And Patreon's making a slice and PayPal's making a slice over the money that's just sort of going in a circle. Like I'm supporting James, for instance, and James is supporting me. So really what we're doing is every month we're just sort of, buying each other a beer. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that because one of the things that does is it increases visibility. So people go to James's page and they'll see he's supporting me, so they may come support me, whatever. But you do have to bring in fresh blood, and so I'm seeing that happen for myself and for other creators. But yeah, one of these days when Patreon has the same cachet that Kickstarter has or Indiegogo has, then I think we'll start to see a lot more new people coming in to support these things. I think that for me, if I wasn't a creator, the weirdest thing would be, and it's still the weirdest thing is um, the idea that I'm not supporting an individual project. Even where you have, because something that your listeners might need to know about Patreon, there are two options as a creator that you have. One option is you can ask for your patrons to back you every month, whether you put anything out or not. And one option is for you to ask your patrons to back you every time you put something out. Now, James and I are of the second model. Every time we put something out, you get, if we decide it's a paid post, because we can put out free posts if we want to. Every time we put out a paid post, if you're a patron, you get dinged for it.
Yeah, I think actually all of you are using that model. Dave, you're also per project as well, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And the upside to that as a patron is if I don't put anything out for 3 months, you don't pay anything out. So you only pay out if I put something out. And I think that works well. But then there are the creators that I'm backing that they get money every month, and just the idea of supporting somebody every month, whether I'm getting anything in return or not, is for some people that's a hurdle that they have to overcome mentally. Do I want to support somebody whether I get anything out of it or not? So
absolutely.
Yeah, thinking about Kickstarter and sort of the parallels between Kickstarter and Patreon, Kickstarter has become in many ways a shopping site, right? It was designed to support this project, but now a lot of times people go there looking for, I want the new Pebble watch, or I want the new, card game put out by the Oatmeal or whatever, and so that drew me toward the pay per project payment system on Patreon. I thought it would be less of a hurdle to ask people to get over, so that I could say, I'm giving you this in exchange for your money, rather than the sort of the traditional patronage model that you mentioned earlier on of, I'm just giving you money so that you can live, and then I expect that you'll create stuff. Another thing that I've seen, and it's been a discussion lately, is some people are crying foul, that Pebble went back to Kickstarter, or the Oatmeal went to Kickstarter, or Nathan Fillion and Alan Tudyk just recently did an Indiegogo for a show that they want to put out.
I'm a backer of that one.
I am a backer of that one as well.
I back that one and the Oatmeal card game.
And that one is a good argument as to why larger people can use Indiegogo. For instance, as they said, they don't trust the networks. And if they want to deliver to the fans, then the fans are going to pay for it, and that worked. But I actually have an email about all of that cynicism, so I want you to continue, and I will read that once we're done there.
Oh, cool. And so I'm looking at right now Patreon, just before the whole Subbable thing, they landed Amanda Palmer. So New York Times bestselling author, sort of a self-published phenom kind of thing. And at the same time, I'm both cheering, yay, Patreon is doing better, but also wondering if the little guys are getting shoved to the side for the visibility of the bigger people. And I see both sides of that, and I see positives and negatives on both sides. So I haven't fully formed an opinion right now, but just as I'm exploring this platform, when things like that happen, it makes me wonder if that's going to make it easier for me or harder for me to get new patrons.
That is definitely a big thought. And on the Amanda Palmer thing, I mean, I think Amanda Palmer helped put Kickstarter kind of like on the map in the mainstream eye. I mean, us geeks, we kind of already knew what Kickstarter was at that point, but her big Kickstarter made it into the New York Times. It made it all over the place, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, she's gonna send a nude photo of herself to all of her backers if she gets $1 million." And everybody made such a big deal out of this, and is like, "Yeah, but she has no problem with nudity, so it's not a big deal." But so you're right. On the one hand, it can possibly bring more attention to Patreon, but will it overshadow the little guy? That's definitely, oops, sorry, definitely an interesting question. And before we go forward, I want to read. This is an email from one of my listeners, Aaron Jackson, and so this is kind of goes in the same theme. All right, so for the most part, I've got a positive opinion upon crowdfunding such as Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Patreon, etc. They provide a medium for small to medium-sized groups to either get games made, such as Exploding Kittens, and by the way, he's also in the Q&A. Hi, Aaron. And he just said, yeah, Exploding Kittens, oh yeah. So, gee, I wonder what he backed. Or movies such as what the Dead Gentleman Studios uses it for. However, I feel that while they provide a medium for these groups to get funding to make these projects successful, they've slowly become a place for groups to make projects almost with insane goals just because they know they have a vast following in order to create the project. This is one of the main complaints people have been making throughout the Exploding Kittens Kickstarter, which, full disclosure, I did back and was more than happy to get a game. My biggest complaint comes from groups using it basically as a pre-order system, like the Pebble smartwatch. They're already one of the biggest smartwatch makers out there, and yet they decided they needed to go to Kickstarter for one of their new smartwatches, and quickly broke the Kickstarter website with the sheer volume of people that came into the website. I also recall there being a bit of an issue with Veronica Mars when it raised as much as it did. While I believe these crowdfunding sites can be helpful, I'm beginning to feel as if larger companies may use them as a means of, oh, hey, we can get bunches of money this way.
Mm.
And I think that's definitely a good criticism. I do think that one of my big frustrations is somebody uses Kickstarter or Indiegogo to fund a project that they'd like to do, and they're successful in this project. So then they go back there for the next one. And I kind of feel like it should be a starting point. And if you've established yourself and you have a headquarters and a full business, and I'm going to use Pebble as an example because I just watched their new video for their new watch, and they've got this, they walk through their offices, they have everything set up, they're going to make the watch no matter what. So they've already set this up as a pre-order system, and is it just them exploiting it for marketing? Is it just them being lazy? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what the deal is, but it does feel against the spirit. I feel like if you run a Kickstarter project, you shouldn't keep coming back to it for more and more money. You should be able to build yourself up to a point where you don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Though some people will always need avenues like this. For instance, a radio station nonprofit that I've volunteered for years currently has an Indiegogo campaign going on right now. Every year they try to raise money for Fund Drive. This is how they support themselves. And last year they had some terrible water damage, and they needed to raise more than they ever did before. And after years of dragging their feet, they finally got into the social media world, and they did an Indiegogo campaign. And they were able to raise the money, and they were able to save their studios. So they're back using it again. I think in that case, it can work. And again, this is a once-in-a-year thing. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I'm trying to build my business. Okay, you've helped me build my business. Now I'm back on Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you've built your business, you should be able to move forward. I don't know. I'm rambling too much. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I'll use the Exploding Kittens as an example. I backed it. I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that they succeeded so well. Here's what I don't want to see happen. I don't want to see them come back in a year with another game. I want them to take the fact that they got, what is it, $8-9 million, and fulfill all the orders that they got, but use part of that to put the infrastructure in place, build their own website, create a gaming company, whatever they've got to do so that they've got their own thing. They don't need Kickstarter anymore. Everybody that's a fan of it, when they come out with a new game, we'll go to their website and we'll pre-order it over there. I would like to see that not happen. I would like to see them not come back to Kickstarter in a year with another game. But for people like many of the authors that I support, that don't have a publisher, that don't have the kind of million-dollar success story that other writers have had, keep coming back to Kickstarter, keep coming back to Indiegogo, and I'll keep supporting.
Absolutely.
Until you get to the point where you are a Scott Sigler and you've got your own, in addition to his regular publishing deal, he's got Nullset Productions or Nullset Publishing, whatever. Empty Set, that's it. He's got his own publishing empire, and he doesn't need Kickstarter. He doesn't need Indiegogo. He's got the mechanisms in place so that his fans can buy his books directly from him, and he takes care of all that. If I get there one day, or if James or Dave gets there one day, they're not going to need it, but right now maybe they do. So I don't mind seeing them going back again and again to get the money for their next project, or to use the money from Patreon for their next project, however they work it out.
Absolutely. I can agree with you on that, especially about the self-publishing. There's an author that I have bought every one of her children's books through, I think she does them through Kickstarter. Yeah, through Kickstarter. And she's self-published, so she's not going to have somebody come in and be able to do that, and these children's books are not going to get her to the point where this is all she's going to be able to do and she can set up a business doing this, but they're good enough that I will come back every time, and I don't feel disappointed to see her on Kickstarter again. If she got, a deal with Scholastic and she went to Kickstarter, I'd be scratching my head. Then again, so would Scholastic. They'd have a real problem with that.
I have mixed feelings, and I'd be interested to know what you all think about the Nathan Fillion, Alan Tudyk movie, web series. Because I don't mind them coming to Kickstarter, because as actors and writers, they may not have the mechanisms in place to do this on their own. Because before you would do something like this on your own, you'd have to put all these mechanisms in place. They wouldn't necessarily be able to appeal directly to their fans. Now that they've done this and they've had this amazing success, again, I'd like to see them not come back to Kickstarter. So again, I put them on the same page as I do the Exploding Kittens. One time, great. 2 times, probably not so much. But I may be wrong, so I'd be interested to know what you guys think about that kind of situation, about them coming back next time.
I agree. I think they should get their, if they can get this web series off the ground, they should have a studio that can fund their own the next time.
So here's a good. Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope. Go ahead.
So here's Penn Jillette, about a year ago, when he started his campaign for his director's cut movie, which I am also a backer of, he went through on his Penn Sunday School podcast. He went through a lot of this thinking in an episode, basically where they went live with that campaign. And I'm blanking on what site they used. It's not one of the top couple. It's the only time I was the first. I was newly to that site when I backed that project. But he was pointing out how, so they made the Aristocrats, right? Him and Teller and their company made the Aristocrats. They made Tim's Vermeer, both successful, both profitable movies that were highly regarded, good critical response. They said they were just barely in the black on both of them. So when you say these guys, have access to a lot of capital, why do they need to come to us? He pointed out that he said there's only so much of my own money I can put into these projects. So I do put my own money into this. What we're doing is increasing the reach of what we can accomplish by adding in extra money that we could. So instead of it being, instead of making a $200,000 movie, we're making a $2 million movie.
It's a force multiplier.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not going to stop the production when they run out of money, because they do have access to some capital, but they're not putting not funding it 100% from their own war chest. And he kind of went through why that makes good business sense. Even when there's a backlash against people who have access, or I think it's more perceived access, because who are we to say who you can pick up the phone and get money from? Because I certainly don't know how readily Alan Tudyk can get somebody to write him $1 million check. I'm gonna guess not that easily. I think it's probably more easier for him to get $50,000 $20 checks than $1 million check from somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I think Alan Tudyk is a good example for that, because Penn Jillette is a household name. If I say Alan Tudyk outside of Browncoats, how many people are going to know who that is?
Yeah.
Okay, it was Pirate Steve. Oh, I liked Pirate Steve. Outside of that, really, people don't know who he is.
Yeah, that's why I don't mind seeing a couple of actors come and do this, or even Penn Jillette necessarily, because like you said, and I know there are a lot of expenses involved, and as wealthy as he may be compared to me, he's not movie studio wealthy. So depending on what kind of money you need to accomplish your project, I get not having it on your own, and I get maybe not having access to a studio. Well, I guess what I'm saying is not so much how do you feel about them coming for the first time to crowdfunding, or maybe even for the second time, but how many bites do you get at the apple before you should really just have your own setup in place to do your thing.
Right. If you do it more than a couple campaigns, and when you're done, you don't have a functioning business that's generating its own capital, then maybe you've had enough swings at the piñata.
I like that analogy. That's a good one. So that was fundanything.com, by the way,
Right.
and I've never actually funded anything through that. Were you a backer on fundanything.com?
I was, and that's the only thing I've ever backed on there.
Was it a good experience?
It was, frankly, I did it a year ago. I don't remember much about it. It was not a negative one. So,
that's good to know.
But what it didn't do, here's an example. So what we're talking about, so Kickstarter has a brand, Patreon has a brand. Clearly, by the fact that I couldn't remember the name of the site, Fund Anything does not have much of a brand. Indiegogo has a brand. Some of these things don't. Like Brand Gamblin is doing his fundraising thing. I don't remember what site that's on.
Brand Gamblin definitely has a brand.
Brand Gamblin, I think, has done Kickstarter. He's done Indiegogo. Currently, he's doing something with GoFundMe, but that's a little bit different. Yeah, GoFundMe
a personal thing, but I don't even. But all I'm saying is that whatever site it was, I didn't even remember the site.
Yep.
So whether or not you remember where they're doing this, I think actually is some important data.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, and this gets back to something that you said earlier about fresh users willing to put their credit card information into a website. The thing that I think has Kickstarter going, what Kickstarter has going for it is that it's Amazon payments. And as we've learned from the Subble thing, they're trying to take more of a piece of the pie. But people trust Amazon because we've been using them from almost the dawn of the internet. I mean, that's really the first. I think I purchased something from Amazon before I even purchased anything through eBay back in the early days. So people trust that. And so they're like, yeah, I can use Amazon payments, no problem. And Indiegogo has been using PayPal, that whether or not you trust PayPal, you end up using them because sometimes there's no other alternative.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a huge fan of PayPal, especially PayPal dealing with tied to anybody's bank accounts, because I think that they've got too much power in that case. And people should be wise when using it. But I use PayPal. Mm-hmm. I've started using it more and more.
I got into writing, doing nonfiction and articles online, and the only way that they would pay me was through PayPal.
Nice. So PayPal was taking a cut of your pay.
Yes, but it came out of their side. Like,
Oh, that's good.
I got what they agreed to, but still, I mean, I had to have PayPal for that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
One thing I'd like to talk about, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so if you've got any other topics, that's great. But what I'd like to touch on would be there are some people that I have backed on through Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Patreon, where they've sent their rewards. I've got everything that they've sent, and I still haven't opened it. I back people just because I want them to succeed. I may not necessarily like. There was a guy on Patreon who was making these crazy a cappella music videos of video game themes, and I thought that was just such a lunatic idea that I had to back it, and that's not my thing. So I backed him for probably 6 or 7 months just because I thought it was insane. And I don't know if that's something that you guys do. If you get a reward, like I haven't read all of James's stories, but I've been backing him ever since I've
I haven't
known
read
him.
all of yours, Scott.
So I mean, because we don't have time, we're creators, whatever. But I'm curious, and I guess your listeners could answer in the Q&A or whatever. If you back something, do you always, take advantage of that reward, or are you just backing it because you believe in the project and the outcome is not necessarily the meaningful thing?
Okay, Dave, when you get your audio back, we'll bring you back. Why am I talking to him? Sorry. This will get cut out. I'm going to just send him a very quick text here. We're not hearing Dave because he lost his audio. Sorry. This is not fun for the people watching live, but that's what happens when you watch live. But
Hey,
the live means you get to hear like people say swears and stuff that I cut out of the MP3 feed.
poop and farts. I don't know,
That's
I'm just trying to make it entertaining for people.
All right, so I have to say that on Patreon I do that more. I have not read all of Scott's stories, but I've read quite a few of them. But when work gets busy, I go on and I go, oh, I'll get back to that later. I always have access to it. Whereas for Indiegogo and Kickstarter and the projects where I'm getting physical rewards shipped, most of the time I get those shipped to my sister in New York, so that I don't have to pay extra shipping to Canada. It was especially funny when I was backing the Dakota Ring Theater project because it was coming from Canada, but it would have cost me more to ship into Canada. So whenever I go and visit family, it's like Christmas. I have all these great presents waiting for me. But on Patreon, it's really more about supporting the people, and as long as they're writing, I'm happy. And I'm really a big fan of when it comes to the podcasts ones, because most often if you pay or don't pay, you're still getting the product, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and you might get some extra cool things, but if you pay or don't pay, you're supporting that person and you're making them do stuff. Not making them do stuff, inspiring them to do stuff.
Enabling them to use that.
Enabling them, exactly. They can say to their spouse, I have to record a podcast. People are paying for it and not get flack, They can justify the time out of their schedule to do it. And so I think that's perfect. Any other answers from the panel?
So I missed a question because I was having audio problems.
Sorry, Dave.
Oh, sorry. So that the whole reason I went on the per creation model is because I had kind of a sketchy schedule for a while there, and I thought it was unrealistic and uncool to ask people to support me if I wasn't doing a weekly podcast, and so I made it per creation, and my first milestone was to put me on a weekly schedule, which was met within like 3 days. So that almost kind of evened out in the wash, where it really wasn't even an issue almost immediately into the campaign. But the side effect, like the softer kind of ones that I didn't anticipate, were now I feel like I have an explicit contract with a group of people that it's not just me half-assing around, that I not only do I owe them the schedule because I agreed to them that if they did this for me, I would go on a regular schedule. But now I feel like it's more incumbent on me for the quality of everything. I look at this and I'm thinking, is this worth people paying me $32 for this show?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, I don't want to do it. And so, I was recording, some fraction, like 80% of my shows in my car at one point, and I realized, well, I don't feel like that's reasonable to ask people to pay me money for shows I recorded in my car.
Mm-hmm.
So I recorded one in my car, but I put it up as a free, as a bonus episode because I thought, well, I'm not asking people to pay for, what's essentially a sub, a less than baseline quality show. So it had those effects on me right away.
So far, you haven't had any episodes that aren't available to everyone anyway, right?
They're always available. So one of the first things that I did is, and I didn't actually even think about this ahead of time or promote it as such. It just sort of happened organically as I decided, since I decided I wanted to get on a routine, regular schedule, that I picked the day, and then just as soon as I can get the thing recorded, I post it to Patreon first. Now, it's one of these things that is an absolutely free perk. Costs me nothing to provide this to people other than, working ahead. And it gives the patrons something that nobody else has, right? Which is, 1 to 3 day early access to these shows. Now, me personally, as a consumer of podcasts, I have a 60-day long queue. So it doesn't, so people offer that to me all the time, and I never do it because what am I going to do with that, right? But at least a couple of people, are doing, are using it because they were giving me feedback on a show before it hit the public feed. So, it's a thing that if people like, they can have. I certainly wouldn't care about it if the tables were turned. It wouldn't do anything for me, but it's a perk. It's a nice perk that I can give to everybody. And if somebody was a 1 cent a show supporter, they would still get that, right? I do it to the all patrons, no matter what level. And so, it's just a nice thing that happened. And again, I'm feeling my way. Very little of this was premeditated. I tried to think through a lot of stuff, and I was asking people questions. And basically, the response I got from practically everybody was some variation of "shut up and take my money." So
Yeah.
I just decided to think less and do more.
Well, and you are a big supporter of the program Flatter, which I tried, and I could never get it to work right.
Yeah.
And it just made me feel like a dummy, where I'm like, I'm not this dumb. I know I'm not this dumb.
Well, so I'd love to talk about Flatter versus Patreon if you want me to. Because
is it okay if I jump in real quick to
absolutely.
the other side of what Dave was saying? So I today just put up my second private post. The first private post that I put up, and private meaning only patrons can see it. Everything else I've done was public. The very first one that was private just for patrons was links to ebook versions of everything else that I've ever written, other than the short stories that were going on Patreon, because I was feeling guilty for them not being able to get something. And so I've been serializing a story, and today was the very first chapter that went up. It's the 6th chapter, so the first 5 are free for anybody to read, and I put it up as private just for patrons, partly because I've been feeling guilty that my patrons are subsidizing stuff that everybody else is getting for free, rather than thinking about it the other way around. And I'm not sure exactly where I land on this. I like both sides of that. I feel like we all said we want to be accountable in some sense. That we're not going to ask the patrons to pay us money if we're not producing something we feel is worthy to be paid for. But then I feel like the patrons are sort of getting screwed a little bit if they don't get something that that nobody else gets. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I one of the things that I do, in addition to the posts that are for patrons only, like the serialized novel that I put out and stuff, if you're a patron, at the lowest level, you will get basically everything that I put on Patreon. You can only read on your computer. You click the link, you read it on your screen or your device or whatever. You click the link, you can read it, but you can't save it. So my patrons, depending on what level they get, depending on what level they pledge at, will either get a PDF or an EPUB of the work, either when it's finished to my satisfaction enough to give it to them, or when it's actually published. So one of the consequences that happened that I didn't think about was I put out a story on Patreon, and then when I decided to publish it, I published it with, and I just published this in the last couple of days, I published it with a second story that never appeared on Patreon for anybody. But because my patrons backed that first story, when the two, what would you call that? It's not a triptych. I guess it's a diptych. So when the two stories, when the two stories went up on Amazon this week, I said, well, you're my patrons. I promised you get this story when it was published. So you're also getting this other story for free because you basically already paid for it. So it's not really for free. But so I mean, it's definitely good to think about what you can do for your patrons because they believe in you, because they're backing you. But the flip side of that is, and speaking as a patron, I'm not backing you because I'm going to get stuff. And that was kind of my question. I'm backing you because I believe in what you're doing. I want you to be able to make some money off of it. If as a result I get something that nobody else gets, okay, that's great. But I want to enable you to put your stuff out there for other people to enjoy. So for me, it's not important to get something that nobody else gets, even if it's for a couple of days. I just want you to put stuff out there. But yeah, I definitely think that it's not a bad idea because not everybody is like me to have that as an option.
Well, I think this is a perfect segue to read some more emails. This one I got from Hugh O'Donnell, which, by the way, has a Patreon, so please go and back him. He's pretty great. He's got the Way of the Buffalo podcast. It's all about short stories and showcasing creatives, and he is also he's also an author. He's a writer. I'm trying to say writer and author at the same time, and it's coming out as a author. But he's really great, and he's got some really great short stories. But he says, hey, can't make tomorrow's cast, but I would like to comment that Patreon is awesome because it allows me to support people's work at a level I can afford on a regular basis and vice versa, obviously. And I want to mention that so I've said to people, and I don't remember if I've said it during this call or not, but I say to people all the time, I am broke. And when you are looking at me, like nobody wants to see my tax statement. You really don't, because I am an artist, and that's what I do for a living. So when they say starving artist, they mean it. But with Patreon, I can give a tiny amount, $1 here, $1 there, 25 cents there, whatever, and it ends up being something that I can afford. And in addition to that, on Patreon, you can set caps for how much you're willing to spend a month. So, for instance, Dave, he participates in Dog Days of Podcasting. So he's going to be putting out 30 podcasts for the month of August. So what you can do is you go in there and you say, all right, I'm backing each of his episodes, but you can put a cap so that you're not spending, say you did $1 an episode, you're not spending $30 for the month of August and go, whoa, where did that come from?
And just to point out, too, I'm not going to have 30 paid episodes that month.
Oh, okay. But even so, if you did, or if a writer got into a writing spurt and said, you know what, I'm gonna do 30 short stories this month because I've got off from work the entire month, or whatever it is, so you're able to manage it, and you never have a surprise bill. And that's one thing that I really like, is you can sponsor people per creation or per month, and never be surprised. And you can go around sponsoring different people and still set that cap for yourself for all of your campaigns that you're backing. So that say you're supporting 10 different people, but generally each month only 3 of them produce anything. Say one month all 10 of them produce something. Again, you're not surprised by a large bill.
I've had people come to me and say, dude, I'm sorry, I backed you at this level. I've got to scale it back because things are tough. And I'm like, seriously, whatever you need to do, don't apologize for supporting me. I mean, whether it's for $1 a month or, I've actually got somebody that I don't know, and this is insane. I have no idea who this person is, who's backing me at one of my topmost tiers. I still haven't figured out, and I'm not asking. But wherever you feel comfortable, don't apologize for supporting me. Or don't apologize if you've got to stop supporting me for a while. But the thing that I love about Patreon is, on the creator side, it gives us the option to give stuff away for free, to decide what we want people to pay for, and then it gives you, as the patron, the control over your budget to say, okay, I've got this month I can do this much, and you've got until the end of the month as a patron, because you don't get charged until the last day of the month. And if things go south on the 25th and you're like, I've just got to put a cap on that, then go ahead and put a cap on that. So it's a beautiful amount of control that you get on both sides of the coin, and that's one thing that I love about Patreon.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm really trying to. So the generosity of the people that were the early supporters, I guess, shouldn't have surprised me, because those, the people that are going to jump on first are the most invested, and kind of the people who are, I had a core of people, mostly people who were flattering me, and I emailed those people and said, asked them about this, and I said, do you feel like I'm trying to double dip? Do you feel like I'm trying to soak you? By saying, look, you've been generous this way, now give me more money a different way. And that's where I got, largely the shut up and take your money responses. But what I do, unintentionally, kind of that idea of like the writer who has the mailing list, it sort of turned into that, where I want to say 80% of those people supported me within that first week. That, from that email, those people that I was asking questions for, and then I just said, okay, thanks for all your input, it's live. And most of those people went and supported me within 24, 48 hours. But now I feel like I've got, in some ways, I've almost got a top-heavy distribution. I have very few people supporting me under $1, and I'm not at all kidding. And I'm trying to emphasize the fact that I would be delighted to get some nickel a show supporters. I have 25 cents a show as my bottom thing, but you're not prohibited from putting less than that, and I don't care. You would still get the early episodes. I'm trying to get that across to people. The guys from Cord Killers, which I think maybe was the very first thing that I supported on Patreon, point out that there's a loophole in the system, which is that your card doesn't get dinged until $10. So if the only thing you supported was, say, 10 cents a show, you're going to support them for a long time before you ever have to pay the first time. You'll have built up this, this basically queue of charges, but they don't hit your card for 10 cents. So there's really there's no downside to kind of having pledges at the bottom end. And I really want to. It seems weird to ask people to give. I don't want to ask people to give me less money. I just want people who aren't giving me money to give me a low amount. I would love to have hundreds of 1 cent patrons. That would be perfectly fine with me.
And that's the thing. I mean, people can pledge at any level. The levels that we set up as creators, at this level you get this, at this level you get that. That's not set in stone. I mean, just because my lowest pledge point is $1 doesn't mean you can't back me at 50 cents or 10 cents or whatever. And people think, well, that's nothing. But if I got 1,000 people to give me 50 cents for everything that I put out, that's $500. I'm okay with that. I really am okay with that. So yeah, I mean, don't feel bad as a patron if you can't give a bunch of money. It's okay. We're okay with getting a little bit of money over getting no money. Either way, I want you to be reading my stuff. If you can't give anything, you're going to be able to read some of my things. But if you can only give me $1 a month, that's cool. Give me $1 a month. Go tell 25 of your friends to give $1 a month. That's $26 a month. So, so it's a force multiplier.
And it there's this old story about, the people at church, and the rich man goes and he puts $100 into the collection plate, and then the struggling family, the mother puts in a dollar and the daughter puts in 25 cents, and the daughter feels, Mom, I'm not doing enough. I mean, I haven't given enough to the poor. Look at that man. He gave $100. I can never get to that point. And it's like, no, you're actually giving more, because percentage-wise, I'm expanding on the parable. Percentage-wise, you're giving more of yourself than this rich person who, $100 is like a penny to them. And then it, makes the girl feel good, and she becomes a charitable person. I'm very bad at paraphrasing, but the being able to support people that you enjoy their creations from, that you enjoy their creativity, it gives you, I don't want to say ownership, but it makes you feel good, like you're part of something. There is a podcast that I give a little bit to every month through PayPal. They don't have a Patreon, but I've been enjoying their podcast for so long that I just felt like I really want to give something. And they never ask for it. They have the button on their site, but they never ask for it. And I just say, you know what? Yeah, let me give some of this, because I've been enjoying this for free for so long, and let me do something. And I feel good about it. And when I listen to the episodes, I feel good about it, even though I'm not giving that much. And I think that Patreon's really good, because it gives your fans and your listeners and your readers that opportunity to feel like they're part of something.
Mm-hmm. And they are, and that's the other thing I tell people. Whether you're my fan or Dave's fan or Nutty's fan, if you could give $0, the best thing you could possibly do is go tell a buttload of people about this thing that you love. I would rather have reviews at this point than 50 cents. If you want to give me 50 cents a review, that's awesome. But it's also about discoverability, and that's another thing that Patreon is working on, is their discoverability piece, which is how to find new people. So yeah, I mean, the fact that you are backing, whether it's through Patreon or through Kickstarter or through the PayPal button on Flash Pulp's website, and I'll go ahead and shout out, since you would.
Yeah, you totally knew exactly who I was talking about.
You're a backer of yours too, and I'm part of Dead Robot Society, and I keep telling Justin, we need to get on Patreon, we need to get on Patreon, we need to get on Patreon, because people want to support what they believe in. People want to support what they enjoy, whether it's through a review or $1 a month or whatever. Writing a review on iTunes, whatever it is, people want to support you if they believe in you, and it's communicating that to the creator. So however you can communicate to the creators that you enjoy, hey, I love what you're doing, whether it's money, an email, a voicemail, a review, whatever you can afford time or money-wise, means tenfold to the creator, at least at our level. Maybe not so much at Stephen King's level, but at the level that we're playing at, whatever you as a fan can give is 10 times whatever you think it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to say, does anyone have anything more to say?
So I've been trying to not interrupt, and of course I interrupted in my trying to not interrupt. But yeah, we love our fans, right? And that connection with the fans is so incredibly important. But one of the, I even hesitate to call it a weakness, but one of the things that's happening between sort of traditional historical patronage and all of that, and what we've got now is that historically people could, well, they could be terrible at public speaking and introverted and, all of that, and still just be good at their craft and have a patron. Whereas now, you have to be awesome at social media. You have to be able to be in front of people. You have to be able to connect and share your passion with people. And so, I think those of us here are pretty good at that. But I wonder then about, the author who is terrified of email, let alone social media, and are we, through this sort of move towards crowdfunding, are we losing some of those voices from art?
Mm-hmm. That's a fair point.
It's a good question. I actually have a friend who is a new author, and as he says, what he cares more about over ebook sales is he just wants to get some reviews on his books, and he's not social at all. I may be, one of his few friends that he still talks to, and it's a struggle for him, for very difficult, because he can try the social media, but if you're just not good at socializing, what do you do? That's when you need to get a mouthpiece for you.
I look at some authors that I know that either aren't very good at it or don't have time, and they actually, in some cases, have. I'm thinking of A Real Girl for Scott Sigler. I mean, Scott's not bad at social stuff, but it's nice to have a less insane mouthpiece through A Real Girl, or in the case of the people that aren't as vocal. That's even more important for the fans that they do have to step up and be the cheerleaders for those writers. But you're right. I mean, how does a brand new creator break into the scene? And that's where you have to be, if you're bashful in front of people, that's where you at least have to be willing to approach other creators and say, hey, can you help me out here? So yeah, that's one possible solution. But yeah, that's tough.
All right, so unless we have any more thoughts on that per se, we're going to get into the email that I have that is criticizing crowdfunding. This is from a listener that the Nutcases the Mixed Nutcases would be familiar with, because she's done a bunch of my bumpers and she was on my last episode. This is from Lulu. All right. Because mine is not a very popular opinion in our crowd, and I got some flack for it. My comment is aimed at writing and podcasting only. Maybe crowdfunding is good for other kinds of businesses, but that's where my interests lie. Number one, I don't take well to being taken hostage. If you want my next story, you have to join this site and pay me advance to have it spiel just makes me turn away and ignore it, which I think we've all discussed that, that's one way that you can go, but that's not necessarily the way that everyone should go. And I feel as a podcaster that if it's a podcast, I have a really hard time with paywalls and podcasts. I do like the idea of giving stuff early, giving a couple of bonus episodes, something special, but I agree, it's never worked out very well, the pay for podcasts, in my opinion. Anyone else?
There are some, like Jimmy Pardo with Never Not Funny, or Dan Class, or even Don and Drew. They have the model of the free episode versus the not free episode. So, like, for example, with Jimmy Pardo, you get a truncated episode. I think Dan Class does a similar thing.
And I think Bert did that for a while too. Like, she had one where the swearing was bleeped, and then there was swearing and extra segments in the paid version.
Yeah, Mysterious Universe is another good example. They have they're a great podcast, and they have their free weekly episode. But if you become a Plus member and pay for either their app or whatever, you get an additional episode a week, and you get their extension, which is usually an extra hour at least, if not more. So yeah, I'm not a fan of paywalls, which is one of the reasons why I give a significant portion of stuff away for free. You're never going to get everything of mine for free, but I will always try and give you something for free so that you can at least decide for yourself, is this something that you want to get into? Which is why I like, as an author, Smashwords versus Amazon or some of the other bigger sites. I have creative control over how much free I give you, and I could charge you nothing if I wanted to, which Amazon doesn't give you that option. So yeah, I mean that's I think that as creators on the lower end of the scale in terms of audience size and income, um, you got to give a little bit away so that at least people can know if it's worth getting the whole pie.
Yeah, I think I was informed by a different author. She was telling me that in order to give her book away for free, sometimes you couldn't do it to specific people. You couldn't send out codes. She had to. It's like every 3 months or so, you can have it free for 5 days. And you
Yeah,
have to be part of KDP.
yeah, Amazon, and you you have to be Amazon exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah,
Man, that
which
sucks.
is what KDP is, which means that you can't offer it on Smashwords, and you
Well,
can't.
KDP is actually a Kindle Direct platform. Everybody goes through that self-publishes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry then.
That's okay, but you do have to be Kindle exclusive
Right.
in order to take advantage of that 5 days a year of being able to give your stuff away for free, which I think is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. So the next point, number 2. I don't know what the next story is going to be, so why would I pay in advance for something I'm not sure I'll want? I feel like my choices are taken away from me. It's not because I liked some of the stories from an author, then I want to read every single word they put out. Okay.
Well,
fair point.
and that's kind of exactly what I was dealing with. Is I was putting out these short stories, and I know they're all connected, but it's not a clear connection. They're all in the same universe, and so it's not as if you're following one character through all of these stories. And so I was struggling with exactly that same thing. Why would somebody want to come back week after week? I'm not going to build the suspense of a good serial kind of thing. So I decided to do this book as my next novel as a serial. And like Dave said, I'm feeling it around here. I'm figuring it out as I go, and so I'm feeling that critique and trying to respond to it, and we'll figure out how it works. It may be a gigantic flop, or it may be a huge success.
Yeah. I do think, again, for me, as I've said, when it comes to authors, a lot of times I just want to get them writing. And so it doesn't really matter whether or not I like the short story they put out this month, but maybe I like next month's. And so that's fine. But when it comes to podcast, I think this one's particularly for writers, because I think if you like a podcast, you're going to like most of the episodes anyway. So.
Yeah, I kind of get where she's headed, because I know there have been authors who have done Kickstarters, and they've essentially said that if they don't get the Kickstarter successful, they're not going to produce the work anywhere at all, ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's a choice you make as a creator. I think as a consumer, if I see that as what's behind the podcast, if I really believe in the author and I see what they've done before, then I'm willing to take that risk. And if they decide that not getting the Kickstarter successful means they can't devote the time to producing it, that's their choice as a creator. So yeah, I mean I get what she's saying. I don't necessarily agree with her, but it depends. It's a case by case basis.
Yep.
If Jake Bible were to take that approach tomorrow, saying, "Oh, my next story won't come out unless the Kickstarter is successful," I'm probably going to back it because I love everything Jake has done to date. So, or Paul Cooley, same deal, But if Joe Schmo says, if it doesn't come out, if I'm not successful, it's not coming out, then I'm probably not gonna back it because I don't care.
Yep. Well, I do remember. There's an author that I love most of his writing. There's one project he really loves, lots of his fans love, and I really could care less about if he said, all right, if I can't get this Kickstarter to back this book, I'm not working on anything else. I'm probably not going to back it because, well, I didn't like that story. I like your other stories, and I think that is definitely, as a supporter, my prerogative to be able to support what I like. But when it comes to Patreon, I do think you're more supporting the author than a specific story. And when you're going through Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of the others, you're supporting a story, not so much the author, if that makes sense.
Very true. Very true.
Okay. So number 3. The Patreon concept forces authors to put something out on a regular basis, which means, in my honest opinion and experience, some of the things that get published are forced or not ready. Life happens, and inspiration is a finicky thing. And the lack of editing shows, which I guess is for podcasts. So the question is, if they feel that they have to put something out, does that mean that I'm going to get a rushed product, or am I only going to get first drafts?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for my part, I will say that what my patrons are getting is not a final draft. I promise you, you're not going to get a final draft for what you're paying for. But what I also promise you is there will come a final draft that will be edited and polished and nice cover and everything else. And when that comes out, you're getting that for free. So you will ultimately get a final edited, nice, polished draft. It just may not be the month that comes out on Patreon. So what I view my monthly output as is more of a rough cut. You're backing me as a creator. You're not necessarily backing the individual project, like you said. What your money is going towards is me being able to pay cover creators and editors for, and so ultimately you will get a finished product. And the beauty part is, if inspiration doesn't strike, I'm not forced to put anything out. I don't have to put out something every month. Now, Dave, as a podcaster or XYZ webcomic, they've got to have a regular release schedule. That's the nature of the game. And it sounds like Dave has the ethics in place that if it's not a good product, you're still going to get it, but it's going to be free or whatever. Same deal for me. If I don't have something by the 25th, I'm not going to bust my butt to just get words on a page and put something up on the 30th. Nobody's twisting my arm to get this done. I'll put it out on the 10th of the following month, and you'll get it, and it'll be great. So yeah, I get what she's saying, but and as creators, we have to do the quality control. But that's
yeah. I've developed a workflow where today I published a new chapter today, and then sent the next chapter to my editor. And it took me a while to get ahead of things, and a lot of stressful time. But now I'm ahead of things where I'm working well ahead of the things that I'm actually going to put out on Patreon. But the other side of that I think of is, how long is GL in beta, right? Like, there's this sort of time-honored tradition for the last 10 years of putting things out sort of in a beta format to get that user connection and all of that. And I mean, I'm as close to a Google fanboy as I could be a fanboy of anything, and I'm fine with the beta-ness of it, because it works well enough, and then it's that ownership thing of being able to come back and say, oh, here's this bug, or here's this thing. I would love for my fans to be able to come back to me and say, oh, what about this, or this was a mistake, or to give me feedback on what I'm writing to make it better going forward. As I was looking at doing the serialized stuff, I did some research, and Charles Dickens serialized most of his novels. Don't quote me on the most part.
Who
but
was that?
several.
You cut out for a second. Who are you talking about?
I'm sorry about that. Charles Dickens.
Oh yes, excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, right. But as he was going, he actually would change characters and tweak things in the later chapters of the story based on feedback that he got from earlier stuff. I would love that. That's my dream for what Patreon might be.
Mm-hmm.
So viewing writing kind of like a software model.
Yeah.
which is it's a very neat idea, I think.
Well, I mean, given the fact that, like for instance, I just put this thing out and somebody said to me today, I noticed a couple of very, very minor issues. I'm going to get those to you and you're going to update the file, and everybody who already bought it is going to be able to download the updated version, and everybody who buys it is only going to get the best version. So, yeah, writing a software, especially with the EPUB, revolution, that's perfect parallel.
Yeah. All right. So number 3. No, we already did number 3. We're up to number 4. Number 4. We all know that podcasting a story while writing is a bad idea. But with the pressure of Patreon puts on them to deliver, authors become stuck with their earlier ideas, and the end result of the quality suffers from it, and the continuity arc. I think when it comes to specifically podcasting a story, I think we can all agree that podcasting while you're writing it is not going to work very well.
This is this is no different from if you had a audiobook,
Mm-hmm.
you were doing it real time. You've done exactly the same thing. It's not a unique issue to this platform.
Yeah, and you can keep those guidelines of, if I want to podcast a novel, I'm going to have it written, I'm going to go through my draft process, and I'm going to have it recorded, or at least have enough recorded ahead of time so that when I release it and it's considered a Patreon project, that it is as good as it's going to be. And I'm not writing it this month and producing it this month and taking 3 years to finish a standard novel length.
Yeah,
Thus far, I think the overarching theme of her questions is the fear that this is forcing you to put out a substandard product to keep the pipeline going, and I don't feel it. If anything, I feel the opposite. Right? It's forcing me to put out a better product.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you specifically, you're no longer recording in your car.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's forcing me to put out product on a regular basis, which I need. I need some force behind me. That's my personality. I need to know that there's somebody out there who wants to read this, and I'll keep writing it. If I felt like I was,
you need a kick in the pants, you need a deadline.
If I felt like I was screaming into a vacuum, I'd probably stop tomorrow. But I know that there are people out there who believe in me, who believe in what I'm doing, who are willing to put some skin in the game, and I'm not going to disappoint them. I'm not going to put out a first draft. I'm going to put out, a third or fourth draft, and it's still not going to be perfect because I'm a human being, and it's not, I don't have an editor who can turn it around in a week or 2 weeks. But again, if you back what I'm putting out there, what you get at the end of the month isn't the final product, but when the final product comes out in 2 months, when my editor's got a chance to look at it, you're going to get it. So you're not risking anything. The podcast fiction piece of it, I'm not going to podcast it until it's well edited and well done. So yeah, I'm not going to podcast something as I go. So again, that she's right. That's kind of a faulty model. But I don't think Patreon's forcing, if anything, because I'm getting paid for it. As Dave said, it's making me feel like I've got to put out my best quality product. Whereas if I were just throwing it out there to throw it out there, not so much.
Right.
If nobody's paying for it, if it's free for anybody who wants to listen to it, then there's not necessarily a whole lot of skin in the game for me or for you.
And I'm going to finish up her email here, but I think we're all kind of on the same idea here. Is it's not so much the platform, but how some people might use it. That is what's scaring her, and it all depends on the person you're backing. So really, if you're doing something like this, as I tell podcasters all the time, you are your brand, because anybody can listen to a show about Star Trek, but if you want them to listen to your show, you've got to sell yourself. Why should they listen to you talk about Star Trek? And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the idea, is that, especially with Patreon, it's not so much a product as it is a person. So I'm just going to finish this up here. And again, her view is she's very much into audiobooks and ebooks and so forth. So it's a bit more narrow, but it's definitely it's good. It's good feedback, and I like being able to toss back and forth the different ideas. So this is the rest of her email here. My view on book publishing is this: write a book, publish the book, maybe I'll buy the book. I understand that the goal is to eventually become a full-time writer and be able to make a decent living from book sales, but not every author deserves to get there, and those who do don't need Patreon or Kickstarter. Their books speak for them. To me, Patreon and Kickstarter are vicious. They make some authors feel entitled to success and skip the steps that maybe would bring them there in time. What I see when I get crowdfunding demands now, someone stomping their feet on the ground screaming, pay me, pay me, pay me, pay me, or I won't play anymore. And it's not pretty. And again, I can see that for sure. And this reminds me a lot of when I hear people criticize NaNoWriMo, because there are definitely people that have heard about the fad of NaNoWriMo, and they go in and they pound out a 50,000 word novella, and on December 1st it is on Amazon ready for people to buy it. It's not really the intention of NaNoWriMo, but yes, it can be abused. Patreon can be abused. Kickstarter can be abused. I can tell you, I've been burned from some Kickstarters where they promise you the world and they can't deliver. There's one one Kickstarter that I'm still waiting for my perks, and it's been a couple of years, but I'm not so angry because I understand that the person will eventually get to it, and it's taking them longer than they anticipated, and they dreamt too big. And then there's other ones where it's just, yeah, no, this person's not finishing their goal at all, and it's just not going to happen. And that's, sometimes it happens, and sometimes you just got to deal with it. And then there was another one where basically they started a little company, they threw a Kickstarter together to fund this, and they started getting into the software development, and the 5-person team shrunk to 1 because everybody else got full-time jobs. And they had to sell their product to a bigger company, and while they weren't able to give exactly what they had promised, they did try very hard to make their backers happy. So I think it has a lot to do with the individual person running the campaign so much more than the platform. I do think some people are just like, I see this person getting paid, so you should pay me. Well, why? Give me a reason.
Yeah, there's a specific point in that last sentence that I want to address, and just the idea that if an author is good enough, they should just be able to get their book published.
Yeah. We wish.
Yeah. Well, and Patreon exists in part because there's a fundamental brokenness to the systems that we have to support creators, right? It's not a meritocracy. It's what can we sell? TV shows, movies, books, podcasts, music, all of these things that might be fantastic, but they're not marketable, or they're not marketable to a large enough audience. And that's one thing. The big publishers, I've heard this number enough times to where I'm going to repeat it as if it's true. But the idea that you need to sell 10,000 books for a big publisher to break even on publishing, a novel or something. If I could sell 10,000 books, that would be fantastic, right? Because what I get out of it as a self-published author is a lot more. But that also means that if I can sell 1,000 books, I'm at roughly the same spot as if I sold 10,000 through a big publishing house, which means I can write to a smaller audience. I can represent more niche ideas. I'm not bound by what is marketable to a large group, which gives me more freedom as a creator, and I think gives the audience more choice. So yes, there are possibilities for abuse through Patreon and things like that, but they exist because the existing system is really broken. So if this isn't the right answer, at least it's something.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that. And And the current system is broken. I mean, especially when it comes to authors. It used to be that you would get your publishing contract and everything was set and your publishing company would market your book. Well, even now, today, if you are signed on with the big five, it doesn't mean that your publishing company is going to market your book. Even if you're not considered like well down on the list of the books that they want to have come out, um, even if you're like right there in the middle, even if you've made New York Times best-selling numbers, you're still going to have to market yourself. And there's still only so much that they're going to do. And that that is a problem because it used to be, the Stephen Kings, the Nicholas Sparks, they would get this great deal and the publishing company did everything. I mean, do we really think that Stephen King would have been able to market himself if he were a new writer today? Have you seen the guy in an interview? He's not that personable. I love him to death, but he's not that personable. He's not, the guy that you want to see on TV. He's not the guy you want to be telling you about his book. You're like, I really don't want to read about you wrote a book about a girl who got her period? Oh, no, I don't care. Meanwhile, Carrie was a great book.
Even he didn't think it was a good book when he wrote it. So
this is true. How many of those did he have? Like, how many short stories turned into, like, these amazing stories? But he's got the marketing. Not everybody has that. And I feel like this gives the tools to the authors.
Let me say this first. I love Lulu.
Mm-hmm.
I love her to death. I think she couldn't be more wrong.
That's okay.
In her instance. Because, I mean, here's the thing. And I get what she's saying about Kickstarter and the larger things, but Patreon, which is something that we all have in common here, is a beautiful model because there is zero risk or a minimal risk. I mean, for the stuff that I'm not putting out there for free for you to read, you're risking $1. Ooh, and either I'm going to put it out and you're going to pay $1, or I'm not going to put it out and you're not going to pay anything. So, you pay $1, you don't like it, you don't back me next month. I'm not entitled to it. It's as a consumer, it's your, I don't want to use the word job, but it's your call if I'm entitled to it or not. You get to decide if I'm entitled to your $1 or $5 or $10. I don't feel entitled, but I will say that because people have told me they enjoy what I do, I'm going to keep putting it out there, and you can decide if it's good for you or not. And I think it's awesome, and other people think it's awesome, but that doesn't mean that just because I think it's awesome, I'm going to get picked up by, a big publisher. And like James said, I can put it out there. I can write much nichier kind of things and put it out there and have an audience that I'd never have with a major publisher. The other thing that Patreon and Kickstarter and Indiegogo allow us to do, as James said, is to overcome that broken model. And I can't, I'll be honest, I can't afford to pay an editor and a cover designer and a layout person. I can't. It's not something that I can afford. But you guys, through supporting me in my various efforts, have enabled me to pay other incredible people to do these things so that I can put out a quality product. So, and then ultimately my hope is, though I don't see any money from much of this, because almost every penny that I earned from Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and at least 3/4, if not more, of the money that I get from Patreon is all going to people like Scott Pond and James McCarthy and Sue Bayman to do these awesome things for me. So in a sense, you're not supporting just me. You're also supporting my editor, my cover designer, my layout guy, and then ultimately when it comes to the marketplace, yeah, that's when we get to find out if my book is any good. So you guys are helping us get it to the marketplace.
One of the things that I really think that people need to it really kind of makes me uncomfortable, and I think you need to take off the table of this discussion is when things get into the moral level. Like if you question whether somebody deserves something or not, in the larger sense, no one deserves any of this. That's not the controlling the aspect of it that we need to concern ourselves with. It's not a matter. It's not the money. It's not that there's a giant pool of money and that we're going to work down a court. It's not. It's not 1936 style Soviet communism. That's not how it works, right? I mean, I had to think about this and kind of grapple with the fact that I'm asking. I have people who are donating money to me that if you compare our W-2s, I know for a fact my W-2 is larger than their W-2. So is that moral for me to ask for people with less money than me, in their day jobs, to give me money for this project? Because you could say, well, you have the ability to fund that yourself, so why aren't you doing that? And so I sort of had to think that through for myself and just take that off the table. Mm-hmm. That it's not. I'm not going to do or not do this because of that particular concern. It's a thing that's not compulsory. No one is forced to do it. It's entirely voluntary. In my particular case, one of the things that actually put me over the edge of this is because I've tried. I've had at least 6 different models for bringing money towards me since I started this, right? I've sold T-shirts, I've had sponsorships, I've had direct donations, I've had Flatter, I've had Patreon. I offered T-shirts so long ago that original T-shirts are starting to wear out. And so I've had people coming back to me wanting to get a second round of T-shirts. So that actually, in its own way, put me on this path because I thought, well, if I'm going to have to get T-shirts anyway, why don't I start thinking about making the T-shirts part of this Patreon? So I do actually have some physical rewards that I'm giving, right? Which is, and I pretty much, my advisory council mostly told me not to worry about it too much. But I really decided I wanted to do this, which is that my highest tier that I have, which is people are giving in excess of it even, but $3 an episode. If you give that to me, and originally I was going to have some rules about how long you had to support, but at the end of the year, somewhere like after Thanksgiving, I'm going to create a shirt that says, it's my shirt, but on the back it'll say, we kept the lights on in 2015, and it'll have the list of every patron who was in that tier, and I'm going to give them a shirt, and nobody but them gets that shirt. And then the people at the lower tiers, or people can buy a shirt, but it's not that shirt. So there is an exclusive thing that only this select set of people is going to have access to. And originally, I decided I was going to, you had to be in by April or all this kind of stuff. And then I decided I'm going to take all that off the table. I'm just going to do this for anybody, and we'll see if it gets abused, and we'll see. I mean, the only thing I worry about now is like the fairness of, say somebody comes on board in, August. And you've had people that have been paying, much longer and getting the same thing. I think in general, I don't, if that becomes a problem, I'll worry about it then. But for now, I'm just letting it ride and seeing if it's a problem before I put lots of rules around it. But this was the kind of stuff that was driving me, and so I kind of took the deserving part. I mean, ultimately, I don't deserve anyone's money, but that doesn't, that's not the question.
I think that's a fair point. That is definitely a fair point. It as you said, when you say deserve, it gets into a whole, well, who are you to ask me for money kind of a thing. Well, who is anybody? And it's one of those things that has prevented me from trying to ask for any donations. I know for years Nobilis is constantly telling me, put up a donate button. And I'm like, I can't. I don't feel right. But this idea of Patreon, the idea of giving something back definitely seems to work with my idea. The only time I've ever taken donations is I have a wish list, and this has nothing to do with my podcast, but I have a wish list for my daily creativity project, which are pieces of art that take me less than a day to make. Generally, they're like an hour or a couple hours to make. And all through March, I'm doing one a day, so that's a very big deal. And I just had some art supplies on a wish list, and if you go to my website, you can purchase me some supplies, and basically whatever I'm starting to run out of, I put up on there. And I've actually had quite a few people go, "Oh yes, yes, let me do that, let me do that." And when I was running low on supplies, I was able to get it, and it really works out well with this whole this whole patron idea is, and that's what Patreon seems to me to be. It's the same thing. It's giving the creator the tools in order to create.
Hmm.
And if it's thought of in that way, I'm sure that there are people who are using it and are saying, "You have to pay me or I'm taking my toys and going home." Yeah, I'm not going to back you if you have that mentality.
Interesting.
It's self-corrects so easily that I really don't think that's the kind of thing people have to worry too much about, right?
I can't take that attitude, and because I mean, if you back me today, you become a patron. You automatically get access to all the back catalog of patron-only stuff that I put up. So in addition to the risk being minimal, I mean, that reduces the risk even more, because if you become a patron at $5 level or $10 level or whatever, $1 level for that matter, you can go back and look at everything that I posted for Patreon only for the last 8 months or so. So you're in effect, that's cutting your risk even more, because unless all of it sucks, you're getting quite a bit for what you're giving. And Patreon even addresses that. They're like, don't think about the fact that some people are going to be able to game the system, because if you back it at the beginning of the month and you pull your backing before the end of the month, you've got 20 days where you can go through all of this stuff that the creators put up, and you're not risking anything. So really, yeah, I don't deserve your money. It's up to you to decide if I deserve your money. I can't tell you that I deserve your money. You decide if I deserve your money by looking at what I've put out there. And I will say this also: what Patreon has done for me is it's increased what I've done. I think I already said that, but I think it's worth saying again. I think we're all doing more as creators because of this than we would have done otherwise.
And it's more about people backing you, like having that support, than about the actual dollar amounts.
Yeah, most of it's purely psychological. Like there are people out there who believe in me. There are these 17 people who are willing to put some skin in the game and make sure that I can put out a quality product, and that's what's going to happen. I'm going to put stuff out. It's going to happen. I can't not create. And I even put it out there for the people at the upper levels who I tell them, what do you want me to create? I'll give you some input into the next things I do. And usually they say just do whatever you want to do your thing, and that's cool. They believe in what I'm going to put out, so I appreciate that. If anything, the people that have backed me, and I'm late to deliver on some past group crowdfunding stuff. It is coming out. It's happening, and I'm communicating that. I'm doing a better job of communicating that to my fans. But yeah, I mean, if I say that I'm going to put something out, you're going to get it eventually, and because that's a contract that I have with you. So, if anything, I understand what she's saying, but this is definitely pushing me to do more and do better than I would otherwise.
How about you, James?
Oh yeah, Scott touched on something that I think is really important, and for me, it's something that I've really had to make a philosophy. I create stuff, period. Hopefully, people will give me some money for that, right? But it's not. I don't create stuff so people give me money. I create stuff because I have stuff inside of me that I have to get out. I have to share these stories. I have to, cast these visions for other worlds and all of that. I don't know. It's a thing. It's like Dave was talking about. Getting morality out of the game. For me, it's getting a transactionalism out of the game, and it's freeing for me to say, well, if you can help me out, what that is going to do is just give more space for the creativity that I'm already going to do. I'm not asking you to pay me for these stories. I'm asking you to create that space. And again, we keep circling back around to traditional patronage, right? That it's creating the space for all of that. That is, if anything, more important is that the patrons then become a part of the daily creativity process. Not just the readers that we ask for reviews, but please review our stuff because that's like gold. But it's not just that, but it's the daily process of paying for my cup of coffee in the morning because writers need coffee, right, Scott?
Yes, badly.
All right, so basically I think what we're saying, and we've spent a long time talking about this is going to be one of the longer episodes of Nutty Bites, is that people out there, on the whole, are doing more than just making potato salad. They're not there to rip you off. They're just looking for the tools to do what they want to do anyway. And that, at least through Patreon, it's a way to inspire and push these creatives further. And before we get to plugging all of our wonderful things, I do want to say that it was $8,782,571,000 for Exploding Kittens.
That's a lot of. No, I'm not going to say that because it's not appropriate.
I know. No, that is not appropriate. I would have to bleep that out. I really hope, Aaron, you bring Exploding Kittens to Balticon, and we will play you Exploding Kittens. And hopefully by then I will have Stuff and Nonsense, which is another one that I've backed. But yes, it's a brave new world, and it's I am all about giving people tools to push themselves forward. I don't want to spend too much time because we've been talking for over an hour and a half, but it's the same reason why I love the selfie, because you are in control of the camera, whereas Patreon and other forms of crowdfunding, you are in control over the creative process and you are in direct contact with your audience instead of having this what do they call that? I can't remember the word, but basically this institution that is in the way. Guardian.
Intermediary?
Gatekeeper, that's what I was thinking. Yes, instead of this gatekeeper, which is a publishing house that keeps you from your audience and keeps you from being able to attain your dreams, because we're not willing to risk any money on a story that deals with a transgender superhero. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. And
so speaking of tools, one of the things that I'm doing, and so I haven't really broadcasted it, and it's not a thing I promised to the patrons, but one of the things I am doing is I'm keeping a balance sheet of every expense, because one of the things one of the reasons, the rationale for this is to give myself a budget to do things that I wouldn't normally do. And so I'm I'm very rigorous at this point now let's go ahead and get Scott's plug before.
Yes,
if it's that close.
Scott's battery's about to die. So before we get into the after chatter, Scott, why don't you tell people where they can find you and your work and your Patreon?
Yeah, you can go to www.scottroche.com for.
Did we lose
him?
I think we did. You can go to scottroche.com for everything having to do with Scott Roche and all of his works, and that's ROCHE for scottroche.com, and I'm going there right now.
And his Patreon site is patreon.com/Scott Roche.
Excellent. That was my next step and there is a link to his Patreon page right on scottroche.com. If you Google Scott Roche, you should be able to find it, and you can find his past writings. You can find some of his new writings on his Patreon page. You can look for him in iTunes. I'm sure there's somewhere. He's all over the place because I know I've listened to his stuff. So there is definitely that. James, why don't you tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, very similar. It's jamestwood.com or patreon.com/jamestwood. About the only thing is I'm not quite as famous as the guy who is in the movie, so it's just singular. And the other thing is there's a really fun pseudonym out there writing erotica that's just James Wood. So if there's no T in the middle, that's not me.
Okay, the T is important. All right, and Dave, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
I am at evilgeniuschronicles.org. You can find my Patreon at bit.ly/EGC Patreon. And what you can also do is bit.ly EGC Patreon video. More than anything, I really want people to watch my pitch video because it's 4 minutes long, and I spent about 10 hours on the goddamn thing, and I really want people to watch it.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody that was listening. I want to thank everybody for everything, and all of this is going into research for hopefully when I eventually launch something myself. And again, I will always keep episodes 100% free for everyone, and I will always give everything I've given to my listeners, but I think it's about time that I start asking for something. And after this little bit, we're just going to do some extra chatter because Dave had some more things to share, but it's been a long time that we've been recording, and I want to be able to let people go and so forth. So, James, if you'd like to stay, you're more than William? You're more than welcome. This is just a bit of after show. Ooh.
You're much better than William, James.
Yes, you are much better than William. So, Dave, what was it you were going to talk about there?
Oh, so no, I was talking about. So part of my pitch was that I wanted budget to do things that I wouldn't normally do because I try not to spend a lot of the household money on this, right? And so if that's my claim, and that's kind of why I'm asking for that, I have to actually be able to know how much money I need to have. And I spent money. I did some ridiculous things, like I registered a new domain for a joke that literally lasts a second and a half in my pitch video. I registered chronicasdelgeniodiabolico.org simply for a sight gag. And I bought stunt underwear for this video, and so I was actually $30 in the hole before I had even made the campaign live. But so I wanted to.
Stunt underwear.
You have to watch the video. There's three versions of the video, and that is literally the only part that differs amongst them is the stuntiness of the underwear. But it actually kind of bugs me is I don't know that it reads. If anybody has ever watched all three, which I don't know if there exists such a person, I don't know if it reads that I'm actually wearing women's underwear in one of them.
I'm gonna have to go and watch these now.
You have to look at C. From A to C, they get weirder, but it's a surprising problem that wasn't necessarily what you would think as your primary Patreon problem. Is realizing that if you go and buy women's underwear, one, you have to actually have some basic coverage, but that everything that actually I've realized, this ain't gonna work, doesn't really read as women's underwear. So the joke I'm trying to accomplish, I don't know if it ever actually comes across, but I spent so long on this pitch video. I borrowed props, and I really thought through. And in fact, that the pitch video is specifically built around that whole question of asking for money. And I've seen people that needed money that are very uncomfortable about asking. And my advice to them, I gave them back channel advice, which is if you're gonna ask money for money, and this was not even a Patreon campaign. This was just somebody really ran into server expenses that they needed covered, and asked for, PayPal me some money or the lights go off. And I sent some money to this particular podcaster, but the pitch, the show where he was talking about it was so uncomfortable. I'm like, if you want to ask for people, the least you can do is not be uncomfortable, because now the whole thing feels shifty. The least you can do is just be comfortable with it. That seems like a minimum thing you can provide to this transaction, is not make it feel creepy.
So
it feels creepy.
Your way of being comfortable and not being creepy was buying ladies' underwear.
Well, it was. I affected this complete pompous ass character. So the idea that I'm asking for money, do you deserve the money or not? Clearly, I don't. And in fact, I refer to people as peasants. Well, good question, peasant. This whole I sit down and wrote this whole thing out, and I built that in there. Is let's go ahead and puncture the criticism first. Let me go ahead and deflate that. I've already covered that. So if you want to criticize me on that, just watch the video. I already know what you're talking about, and I already took the piss out of myself. So, don't bother.
That's great. And you know what? When I funded your Patreon, I funded it before watching any video.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I'd rather have people watch video and not fund it.
For you. Your podcast spoke for you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and there is a certain, and I know at least one person is supporting it at a really kind of crazy high level, and they're basically kind of doing it. It's basically like a catch-up. It's like a 401k catch-up contribution. They say, well, now that I can do this.
All these years, yeah.
Yeah, it's been years and years.
Now I have money.
Right, and I know for a fact that some of these people are going to do this for a little bit and back down, or leave. And I honestly don't care. I'm fine with whatever. We covered all that. It's, if they go from a high level to 10 cents, God love you. That's 10 cents to the good.
Excellent. So I have a couple of questions that we're going to do in this after bit here, and I'm not sure if I'm going to release this as a separate episode or if I'm going to just make this one really long episode. But what are the business side and tax side things people are going to need to keep in mind? Like, for instance, we talked about how you will get taxed on all of your Patreon earnings. So what are some other business side things that you're going to need to keep in mind?
Do you want to tackle that, James, or?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I was just looking at the 1099s that I have sitting on my desk that still need to go into some sort of software. First of all, tax side, it's not a W-2. It's a 1099, which just means that they told the IRS that you got some money, and now the IRS is coming after you for all of the taxes. So there's self-employment tax and things like that that are important to know.
So do you file as if you would a private business then? Do you?
Yeah, the same as if you had a stall at the flea market or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a freelancer does the same kind of thing. Private businesses do the same kind of thing. Basically, you're paying both sides of Social Security, both sides of Medicare, Medicaid, those kinds of things.
Yep.
Yeah. There was another thing I was going to say. Oh, but the other really cool thing about that is that, I'm sitting in my house, and it's also my office. So I get some really cool tax write-offs for working from home. And that's, I'm not a tax professional. This does not constitute tax advice, legalese, blah, blah, blah. But it's a really handy thing that I get to have, rent and utilities and internet are a part of my business. That's a part of what I do. And so
and if you buy a computer, you get to put part of your computer towards that. It all depends on the percentage of use as well. This isn't, oh, cool, I've got a Patreon, now I can take this computer off my taxes. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah.
But that's true.
Yep.
It definitely gives you that.
And I also, before I solidified anything, I got some, because I have this whole T-shirt thing, I got some quotes on the T-shirts. I know for a fact there's at least some Kickstarters that overachieve, and people have not done the math correctly, and they're they're now losing a little bit per fulfillment, and because they overachieved, they've now multiplied the amount, the number of times they're going to lose money. And if they had just barely made it, they would have lost less money than going 10 times over their goal.
Exactly. It's like the reverse of producers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did want to build that in. So that's kind of, I didn't quite pull the numbers out of a hat because I kind of picked a target where, basically a target margin where I said I don't want the fulfillment of a thing to exceed a certain percentage of the money.
Right.
And so, I kind of looked and I said, okay, how much would the T-shirts cost? If you supported for an entire year at that level, what would, I don't want more than say 25% to be going to the fulfillment end of that. And so I kind of looked around at that and did make some intelligent decisions about that.
Excellent. Do we have a Scott?
We do.
Yay!
Oh, hey.
We did plug for you, by the way.
I switched devices, so I'm back on.
Excellent. And he's now the cover of the Spinal Tap album. Because it's black square. Get it? 3
None
people
more
got
black.
that joke. So we were just talking about the business side, what you need to think about when it comes to taxes, what you need to think about with the extra expenses. Dave was saying how he wanted to make sure that physical rewards did not exceed 25% of any income earned, because otherwise you could end up shooting yourself in the foot. Instead of being a Patreon, where you're supporting somebody to create, you're buying T-shirts.
Yeah, you do have to be careful. I mean, with any crowdfunding effort, you do have to be careful that you leave yourself some padding, not just in terms of time, but also in terms of money.
Absolutely.
That's the other beautiful thing about producing a digital content, because I feel like in my case, the quote unquote reward, if reward there is the content that you've essentially, the reason why you're backing me. So at my upper tiers, I do have a physical reward of you get a book or 2 books, depending on the level of the backing of your choice. If I put out a physical book that year, or 2 physical books or 10 physical books, you get to choose 1 or 2 of those, and I'll ship those to you. But yeah, I mean, you've got to make sure that you cover your bases.
Absolutely. Now, another question I have for you, Dave. This is basically going to be like an after-show thing, so people could have turned off by now. This is just extra nitty-gritty. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about Flattr?
Yes. So Flattr is, I love Flattr so much as a concept, but it falls apart a little in the real world. What they tried to do is take the notion of micropayments, and Cory Doctorow talks about this a lot, is associated with a micropayment is when you click a pay thing, particularly ones where you have to kind of pick. If you're picking whether you're paying 10 cents or 15 cents or 20 cents, there's a mental transaction cost to that. So you've got to get people over a hurdle. And getting people over a hurdle to click a buy button is hard anyway. So when you do it, you don't want to squander that rare opportunity on nickels and dimes. If you're going to get them to click a buy button, you might as well not go on the micropayment, go on the macro payment. What Flattr does is try to separate that out. So it's really, at the time that they started, Dig was more of a thing. It's kind of faded away. But it's like, imagine you Dig or you +1 or Facebook like it, and there's a pool of money that you've got, and every month, everything that you have done that to, that you have given this Flattr to, that pool of money will get divided amongst it. So essentially, you're just going through and +1ing things. In the background, at the end of the month, it kind of settles up and pays everyone. So that's the concept, and I love that concept. It's fantastic to me. I love it so much. The problem being that, for one thing, it seems to be extremely hard to get people. People are very reluctant to sign up with Flattr, partly because you have to pay in euros. And I've had a number of people, because it's a German, I think it's German-based, and so people seem to think that's a problem. It's like, well, I can't pay in euros. Well, it just comes out of your card automatically. The exchange rate just happens, right? You don't have to worry about it.
And there's no foreign transaction fee, right?
Yeah, no, you just put it in. But So I've got, like, on my podcast listener on my phone, I have an auto flattering thing. So you can have flatter in the RSS, so it knows to pay you. And will automatically, if you have flatter enabled, I'm automatically flattering you as I listen to your show. So the nerd in me loves this so much because it's like a technocratic meritocracy. You when you listen, you pay, and that's what, and everything about that seems so good to me. It's just that in the real world, there's so many moving parts. It's such an ocean. It requires boiling the ocean to really get much to happen. And what I was going to do, I was very, very close to doing this, is I was going to go on a complete all-in flatter evangelism advocacy push. And I was going to go down my list of everybody I subscribe to and say, I do this. And if you join Flatter and you do this stuff, I'm going to start giving you money automatically. And I came so close to doing that, and I didn't do it partly because of Patreon. Because I looked at it and I said, this is, in the VHS Betamax war, this is clearly VHS. This is clearly technically inferior. But I think possibly that technological inferiority makes it more appealing because there's not so many moving parts. It doesn't require such a large interconnected system to make things happen.
That is a perfect analogy, by the way. Because Betamax was better.
Everything about Betamax
was
was better,
more
and yet
complicated.
It was more complicated. It was higher cost, and once you start losing the traction, if they don't have Betamax at your mom and pop and then your Blockbusters, you didn't have the ecosystem, and eventually it withered and died.
And of course, porn didn't use it because I know this is a PG podcast. Don't worry, I'm not getting explicit here. But porn didn't use it because it was expensive to film in. It cost more. And that is what won the VHS Betamax war, was porn.
So are you saying we need to figure out the best way to crowdfund pornography, and then we'll know how to?
Got that, actually. There are now sites that the complete control is being taken away from these middlemen, that people can set up a webcam, they can set up their own sites, they can collect money on their own and get rid of the racket that they used to have to deal with. And we all know the song from Avenue Q, The Internet is for Porn. Again, I'm not getting explicit here, but the truth of the matter is it has pushed technology. And thanks to that, VHS became a thing. I remember when I was younger and, the whole, Pee Wee Herman was arrested in a movie theater thing. If that story came out now, people would be confused because there aren't movie theaters that show those movies anymore. Because everybody does things from their home now. And the world has changed, and it's been changed because that industry has advanced technology. But now we're in a time, I rember when the internet first started to the general public and how much of it became pornography, but we are now in an age that it is no longer dominated by that. It's much more dominated by cat pictures, which is fantastic. The fact that the number one site in the world is a search engine, which also does like everything else, and the number two is Facebook. The number two most popular website is Facebook. Just goes to show that industry is no longer the game changer, but it was, and so we have to give the respect for that.
So we've traded one again. That's probably not an appropriate. Yeah. So,
hey, this is the after show.
That's true. So basically, I I agree with Dave and Flatter because I was also a fairly big proponent of Flatter because it was a way to sort of seamlessly give people money for stuff that you enjoyed. And again, it gave you control because if you didn't +1 something or you didn't listen to it or you didn't like it on Facebook, nobody got anything.
Yeah.
So you got to decide who got your money, when, and how much. And that's what I like about Patreon. Again, you've got so much control as a customer, that there is, literally very little risk. And for the for the person that you're backing so much reward because, again, we get a larger cut than we would almost anywhere else. You know, I put my book up on Amazon day before yesterday, and I hate it because I know that the majority of people are going to get it from there, and that's great, but I'm going to get far less money for it if you buy it there. And I mean, buy it wherever you want to buy it, but that's why when I put links up on Facebook yesterday and today, I was like, I put in parentheses, this is better for me, this is, you know, this is good for me, this is better for me, this is best for me in terms of what I get a percentage-wise. And Amazon forces me to price it at a certain price point in order for me to get a decent percentage. I would much rather that my fans use the coupon codes that I provided for them to other sites, pay less for it, give me as a result more, and we're all happy, than for you to go and use Amazon. But if you use Amazon because it's easier or because there's more visibility or because whatever, that's
It
fine. That's
automatically
great.
goes to your phone, which is what
Yeah, I
all other
mean,
people use it for.
yeah, I mean, there's so, although with phones now, you know, if you go to Smashwords and you buy it there from your phone and you click the link, it downloads it and opens it in whatever reader you use.
Nice.
So they're slowly getting rid of the barriers, and I hope that Amazon, you know, crumbles under the weight of its own infrastructure at some point. But that's the thing I loved about Flatter, and what I love about Patreon is it gives back control to the creators and to the fans. And that's the control that Amazon is trying to wrest from both groups.
Yes.
They control so much, and Patreon and Smashwords and sites like that give so much back and give so much value for what they're giving you.
Yeah. You know,
And
they
Flatter
say that what is it? There's the big 5 in publishing. It used to be big 6, and people are saying it's going to go down to big 4. When are people going to admit that Amazon is quite possibly one of the biggest publishers?
Mm-hmm.
And
It really
you're
is.
right.
So yeah, I'm definitely encouraging people to find other venues to pay your artists that you want to support than Amazon. If you've got to use Amazon, that's great. It's there, you can use it, and fantastic. But if you really want to support your artists, whether they're musicians or writers or whatever, go to their website, see if you can buy it directly from them. If you can't, find out where you can buy it from, where it's going to give them the biggest slice of the pie.
Yeah, it's like with music. I think bands get a better percentage if you buy through Bandcamp over iTunes. But still, so many people are like, yeah, but I got an iTunes card.
Right.
It's easier.
And if
I
the
know
thing about
iTunes.
the thing about Bandcamp, again, you get, in generally every experience I've had with Bandcamp, you get to listen to the whole album for free if you want to. You don't get
Often,
that
yeah.
option. You don't get
Yep.
that option with Amazon
No.
all the time. So, you know, if I as a musician put something on Bandcamp, I have the option of letting you listen to the whole thing for free, and then you get to decide if you want to buy it or not. It's
Yep.
beautiful,
And
and you
and
get
you can put
and,
free tracks up there. You can't do that with
yeah,
iTunes unless you make a special arrangement with them.
yeah. So if you really want to support the little guy, make sure that you're supporting them as directly as is easily possible for you to do so.
And if you don't know how, you can always send them a tweet, send them an email, and trust me, I have done that in the past and said to people, you know, what is the best way for me to purchase from you? How do you get the most money? And they'll tell me. They'll tell me exactly what they want. I've had some creatives tell me, you know what, I get more money if you buy it through Smashwords, but I would appreciate if you bought it through this place because that actually counts towards my ranking in publishing lists or whatever, you know, and that they
Right,
may be getting other perks that they care about more than royalties.
right,
And as Aaron Jackson is saying, Bandcamp is great because it's a pay what you will is also a nice thing. That's right. Many creatives, like for instance, I think it's John Anelio does this all the time, where he'll release songs out on Bandcamp and it's pay what you want. And so you can put in $0 and you get that album free. and then you listen to it and go, you know what, I really like that. I'll give him more, and you can go back and give him more money. Or you may know, you know what, I like his music, or I listened to it on the website, and he says pay what you want, and there's a suggestion. I can put more, I can put less. I can't afford $10 for this album, but I've got a couple of bucks that I can give him. So it's another great way to be able to support on your own budget.
Yeah, and Matthew Wayne Selznick actually has recently started a thing where when he releases stories or audio, whether it's ebook or audio on his website, you pay what you want. He's got a minimum of $1 or $2 or whatever, but if you pay more than that, that's great. If you pay a certain amount more than that, he actually donates part of the proceeds back to a nonprofit in his area. So, yeah, those are all great tools, and I love that people can use them. But obviously, as a person who works in technology, I realize that there are some people out there that are not tech savvy, and Amazon's just easier for them, and that's great. If it's easier for you, please go buy from Amazon. That's great. I still get paid. You still get your book. Everybody's happy, but all depends on your level of comfort with the systems in place.
Absolutely. All right. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up after 2 hours and 20 minutes?
I just love that fans have the chance to connect with the creators, and that creators have a chance to connect with fans. Like that.
Agreed.
That is one of the coolest things to me about this whole process. And that money is involved is sort of a dirty necessity, right? Like, if I didn't have to pay bills, I would still be writing stories because I love writing stories and I love being a part of this creative process and all that. But I feel like the more we can get, the more we get like big corporations out of the way, the more money is just going from the fan to the creator, the less overall money it takes to just get stuff made. But also just that reciprocal relationship where I get feedback that I want to incorporate into my stories so that my stories are more of what my fans want. And I love that cycle, and it's juicy. I want more of that.
I mean, I'm getting to the point where, I'm approaching my 11th year as a podcaster, and I've had many ups and down cycles, and this is definitely on an upswing. I feel more motivated, more kind of happy and productive, and I mean, I'm not going to say it has zero effect from the money, because it's the funny part of the double think is that it is simultaneously so little money and so much money. If you know what I mean.
Yep.
It's like so much per episode, so little in the scheme of life, but so much for the show. It's really, I mean, I'm already kind of more at a point where I probably expected maybe I would get to in a long time, and and that just helps me. I mean, one of the things that I want to do is more video, and if I do that, it's going to take more time. It's going to, I probably need more and better stuff. So, if I can build up a cushion and know that I have that, then, it's basically just kind of a self-funding, self-funding enterprise. And whatever it funds, it will fund, and then I can spend things without guilt, basically, because I've already earned them. If I need a new camcorder, or I need something, or I need a new mic, it's not a luxury. It's an expense. It's a legitimate expense,
And it's
and
not
I'll keep the receipt
from
because
your kids' money. It's coming from your podcast money.
Yeah, exactly.
Dave, can you do me one favor? You've got like a piece of hair on your foam sock, and it's driving me crazy. It's towards the camera. There we go. That works.
I
can't see that.
I'm like Dave. I have been in podcasting for a number of years, and one of the consistent messages I hear from podcasters was, there's no good way to monetize.
Yep.
And I don't think, that's a huge problem. It has been for years. Well, here's your solution.
Yep.
Patreon is your solution. I mean, you can still give it away for free. You don't have to have a paywall. but you're giving your fans an easy way to give you money if they want to, and if they don't or can't, they still get your stuff, and it's an easy way for you to get the money that they send you. It's win-win. If you're a podcaster or an author or a creator of any kind, and you're not at least thinking hard about using Patreon or something like it, and I don't know if there's anything really like it that I'm aware of, then
It
you're making
was.
a
It was
mistake.
subbable.
Yeah.
And
So
PayPal,
if
just a regular monthly donation through PayPal.
Well, yeah, but
Mm.
PayPal, there's some issues with that,
Yeah.
and not everybody likes PayPal. This gives you a little bit more freedom, and yeah, I think you really should consider, Nutty, I'm looking at you, setting up a Patreon, because it's, again, you're not requiring that your fans pay it. You're just giving them an option. If they want to do it, great. If they don't, fine. Either way, you're going to put the podcast out.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you're giving people an option to throw money at you. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
And on part of that, I learned a long time ago to not say no for other people.
Yes.
Right. So I'm not trying to say yes for anybody, but I'm not trying to take away the option for them to say yes. It's just out there. If you want to give me money for writing these stories, you can say yes or no. That's your choice, rather than me making the choice for you by taking away your option.
That's actually a really good point, and because if I look at my situation, I'm telling everyone no right now.
Yes, you are.
I am.
And
I have nothing set up for anybody to help me financially at all. So I'm definitely saying no to people. And it's funny because Scott said a word that I was trying to avoid because it gives me hives now. And that word is monetize, especially when it comes to podcasting. Because every time I hear somebody say, how do I monetize my podcast? I get hives because I've seen it happen to some podcasts where they lose what I love about the show, and that's them and their personality, and they take on this corporate vibe, and they're never able to live up to the promises and what they are able to expect from their sponsors. Some people have been able to do it. We mentioned Scott Sigler a lot, but he's got 2 sponsors for every episode. He's able to do it where it's not getting in the way of the show or the story. He puts a nice personal spin on it, so you don't feel like fast forwarding, and it's great. But that's one guy. So many times I hear people turning their podcasts into ads, and they lose all credibility. I no longer believe what they have to tell me because I know that they're just trying to push a product. Or they try to clean up and sound like radio, which if I wanted to listen to radio, I'd be listening to radio. And it just it takes all the passion away. And whereas this is a way that you can get some financial assistance without selling your soul.
Yeah, and you don't have to give Squarespace any money. You don't have to give them any FaceTime or whoever it is that that your ad is. It's pretty bulletproof. And I read something recently, and I forget exactly how they put it, but you put it pretty well. That basically said, well, I'm not going to write this story or whatever because I don't think they'll like it.
Yep.
I'm not gonna send this story to Escape Pod or Pseudopod because I don't think they'll like it. Don't be the editor. Don't be the customer. Just be the writer and send it out there. And if they don't want it, they get to tell you no. Don't tell them no for them.
And if they're actually giving you some pennies or some dollars behind it, they're gonna feel able to tell you, no, I did not like that story. That was a bad story.
Right.
And they can give you some feedback.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
it goes along when I talk to other artists, I've mentored other artists in my past, and I have my own mentors. But one of the big things that I tell young artists is don't just do free work. And so many times I want to do free work, and there have been times that I've just done work for people free because I really believed in the project. But the problem is, if if you do art for somebody and you're not asking for anything in return, and it's not up to what they want, they don't feel entitled to tell you, can you change this, can you change that? And so you as an artist is getting a disservice because you're not producing what should be produced, and the person you're producing it for is getting a disservice because they don't feel comfortable asking for the changes that they need. Whereas if there's a little bit of money involved, they feel like, okay, can you change that font? Yeah, I like this part, but I don't like that part. And eventually you end up with a final project, or sorry, a final product that's worth something. So I feel like with Patreon, it will give your listeners that voice, because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners, or sorry, readers, or whomever, your audience. There's a lot of people in your audience who might be willing to criticize, but they're like, I'm getting it for free. Who am I to complain? But if they're giving you $1 every month, they might say, you know what? I don't really like this part. And that doesn't mean you have to change it, but it means you're actually getting honest feedback.
Yeah, there's community, there's involvement,
Well,
there's buy-in.
The way I refer to that is it makes the contract explicit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, so we are really going to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. This was such a great conversation. We had 2 or 3 viewers throughout, which was kind of fun. This will get cleaned up. Swears will be bleeped out, and it will be put out on the podcast feed. And I really appreciate anyone giving feedback on this and any of your thoughts, and continuing the discussion in the Nutty Bites group on Facebook, facebook.com/group/nuttybites. And before we go, what I would like to do is I want each of you to tell me of a crowdfunding project that isn't getting enough attention. So pimp something you think needs attention.
I got it. Experiment.com, crowdfunding platform for science.
Ooh.
It's experiment, and so it's all of these things where they can't get a federal grant, they can't get a university to buy into it, and you can go through and look at scientific projects that need funding, and they're usually in the $1,000 to $10,000 range. So it's not like they're buying, a particle collider or anything like that. But yeah, if you've ever said, why haven't they done a study on blah, then you should go to experiment.com or .org. I pulled it up.
.com.
.com. Yeah.
This looks great. I am excited by this. I'm going to be losing an entire evening looking through this.
I know, right?
Let's fund science. I love it.
It's my favorite.
Anyone else?
I'm looking for it right quick. Oh, Hey Comics Kids.
Ooh.
It's Brad Geiger, who he's represented on Patreon a couple times. He does the Surviving Creativity podcast. His webcomics. He's the guy who does Evil Inc. webcomic. He does a podcast with his kids in the car on the way to school, and he has a Patreon for that podcast. It has 2 patrons, $2 per podcast. I don't. Yeah, so I need to join into that because I actually do listen to the show. But this is like the number one fear that people have is that you'll basically have this campaign, right? or some variation of this. I had the example of the guy that after months and months of pushing it, listening to him on his show, pushing it, he had $6 a month from 2 or 3 people, and this is one that I would like to see get a little more traction.
Excellent. Scott?
I'm switching over to my Patreon page now because I'm sure that I've got one. So give me just a second.
No problem. While you're looking that up, I will plug mine, and that is for actually, let me get the actual website. That might help. But it is for Hugh O'Donnell's Patreon. It's the Way of the Buffalo podcast. He's a fun writer, I really like his writing, and it doesn't come out enough. But this is for his podcast. This is for everything that he does, and he is another one of those podcasters that just is, yeah, he's got a Patreon, but he's still producing and giving to everybody else. I think he has only put out one patron-only episode, and that's basically covering stuff that can't be exactly out in the full public. It's Hugh J. O'Donnell is creating stories and podcasts, so it's both. It's for his writing, it's for his podcasting, and it just so happens that it starts out where he's holding Mini Doc, my co-host's knitted avatar. So if you go to patreon.com/Hugh J. O'Donnell, and there will be links to all of this on the show notes.
I just did it. Good job. You mentioned him earlier. I tried to find by the buffalo thing, and I couldn't find it. And so you said it again, and he just got a pledge.
Yay! See, look at that.
Okay, so mine is, there's a writer, I've known him for quite a while. His name is Philip Carroll. He and I used to work together for Flying Island Press. He's a great young adult author. He's got a podcast called the Pariah Podcast, and it's an audiobook. It's great. I think he's dropped 5 episodes so far. But if you go to patreon.com/NorvalJoe, NorvalJoe, I am his only patron at this point. Again, this is one of those no-risk deals. You can listen to the 4 or 5 episodes that he's put out so far. It's a great story, great characters. He's a very good reader, and it's just supporting his audiobook. And I'm sure that he'll have other podcast novels that he'll be putting out. But yeah, it's good stuff. Definitely would recommend that you support him, especially if you want to support good young adult fiction. So yeah, Norval Joe.
Excellent. All right, and all of these links will be in the show notes. That's right. You're going to have comprehensive show notes for this episode, something I hate doing, but it's definitely worth it here. And I'm going to be investigating everything here. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for spending all of this time with me. I had a blast, and of course, everyone is welcome to come back again.
Thanks, Nutty.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, YouTube.